Hi guys, and welcome to today's Bookmas video, wherein basically we're sitting down to discuss all of my favorite reads of this year, because so far in this year I've read 250 books, and in my opinion I have compiled a presentation of about 50 that are worth reading, coming from a picky reader. So let's just jump right in. So now for context, number one, this was the presentation I was making in that vlog I recorded earlier this week where we were spending a cold day together. Number two, the other videos that I've been speaking about that are kind of leading up and building up for this video, this is what I was trying to speak about. This is why it's going to make sense now, because when I posted earlier in this week and last week my 5-star reads of the year and my rereads of the year, it was kind of building up for this, because in today's video I won't be discussing any of my 5-star reads. I won't be discussing any of the books I gave 6 stars or any of the books I reread this year. These are specifically going to be my favorite reads that were between like 4.5, maybe 4.75 stars this year, because I want them to get their own time to shine, simply because at this point I've discussed my 5 stars and my rereads a little too much, and I want a different selection of books to keep you guys interested, to kind of give you more recommendations, but at the same time actually give these their own time to shine too, because they were great, don't get me wrong. They were just a little shy of the 5-star mark, considering the fact that I keep them on a high pedestal anyway, and I don't want my videos to become repetitive and boring, simply because I found about 17 5-stars, including the rereads I ended up giving 5 stars. I reread about 21 books this year, and if I was only supposed to show you a continued selection of those on repeat, we'd basically be done with majority of the books that I'll be showing you in this video, which is why these are all the books that I probably haven't given a lot of love to yet. I probably haven't spoken about a lot, but these I still ended up loving this year, and in my opinion, the 250 books that I read, these 50 made it worth reading those 250, despite the fact that I didn't like most of those, simply because of how amazing these ones specifically were. And while they weren't necessarily 5 stars and they didn't necessarily hit that mark, I still think about them sometimes enough for it to warrant a whole favorites list on its own, and so that's what we're doing basically in today's video. Now I won't be giving you premise for any of these books, I'll just be explaining why they are my favorites and why they made it to this list, because I've already got so many reading vlogs that have everything I need to say about these books, including premise, including my full in-depth thoughts on them. So if you want specific videos on specific books that you see here, one thing I did do correct in 2025 was going ahead and making sure that every book I read is incorporated in some video somehow. So you just have to look up the video thumbnails or the descriptions, and you'll be able to kind of see which book belongs to which video throughout the year and whatnot. And this is also in the sequence of January to December, and you'll kind of find it and we'll speak about it there. But this one now, I'll be speaking about why they are my favorites in the first place, and let's start. The first book that obviously had to belong here is Tell Me What You Did. Now for context and full transparency, I was sent an arc of this, but I ended up loving it thoroughly on my own opinions, because I actually started it around like last year during the end of Bookmas and whatnot, and I was also attending a wedding at that point. And so I started it as my video, I remember, was saving. Vividly, I was in the hotel room, the video was saving on one end. I figured I was feeling a little drowsy considering it was like really late, and so I started reading, and then by the time I look up, I kid you not, okay, because it was really late. I attended a wedding function, came back, edited my video, saved it to kind of post, and did all these other things, and in the middle of everything, I did not realize what time it became by the time I started this book and I continued reading it, and did not look up until I realized that, oh shit, my video finished saving like about half an hour ago. But basically I read this till about 6 in the morning before I realized that, oh hey, my video is like done saving. So posted the video, continued like my chapter, finished it out, and went to bed. And then the next morning woke up early enough, despite going to bed at 6 and having like a whole day of functions and whatnot, I still locked in and continued reading this on my phone, on my Kindle, every chance I got, because it was so good. I feel like the whole premise with the whole podcast situation and the way it's so fast paced and the concept, the way it was so well executed, I had the best time ever. This did not make it to 5 stars simply because, I'll be so for real, the ending was like a little anticlimactic, but I feel like the whole build-up was great anyway. I had such a good time reading, and it's such a core memory in my head, staying awake till about 6 kind of reading it, and then looking up at the clock and realizing that, oh my god, wait, it's 6 in the morning, and it's not as early or late, I guess, as I thought, and so I should probably get to bed. And so that was just like a surreal moment. This book made me feel that way. It was so good, and I would highly recommend if you're in like a slump and you want something quick to go through with and something that actually hooks your attention, because this was so good. Four Ruined Realms. Now this one is actually the second book in a trilogy. So the first one is 5 Broken Blades, and the last one I believe is like 3 Shattered Souls or something like that. And I'll be so for real with you, 5 Broken Blades, the first one in the series, I did not like, because I read read it the first time last year, around the time I was getting into fantasy, one of my first fantasy books ever. And looking back, I know I did enjoy it somewhat at that point, but it was really slow getting into the premise. And by the time you finally made it to the end, and there was like one last plot twist thrown in your face as a Hail Mary, it wasn't necessarily the saving grace of the book, and I was kind of iffy. I wanted to see where the story would go, but I was kind of iffy about this one specifically and whether I'd love it or not. And I'll tell you, this one hit me like such a surprise slap in the face because it was so good. I feel like there was so much better stuff happening than as compared to the first book, because there's actually things that happen in this plot-wise, and there's, you know, all these challenges and quests that these characters are going on. There's actual direction in this book, and this one was so good. Now I am conflicted about the entire series at this point, because keep in mind I have read the third book in the series too, Three Shattered Souls, and I did not necessarily enjoy that as compared to this, as compared to how much I thought I would after I finished this, which is why I'm not necessarily sure if I want to recommend the series. But if you've already read the first book, you should definitely give this one specifically a try, because this, in my opinion, was really good. If the author made this entire trilogy like a duology or like a big standalone, so like somewhat thicker, made like a 700 odd page standalone, and it would be all like this, I wish I was joking, it would definitely be 5 stars. It's just the other books kind of dragged the potential of this one down, which is why it's on the favorites list. It's not on the 5-star god tier list. Ready or not, the cover is great. I do believe this one handles accidental pregnancy, and all I'm gonna say is I hate that trope, but the way this book did it, I wish I was joking. Genuinely, this was like the most mature adult way of handling situation. And not just that, I feel like it kind of shows you every aspect. It doesn't necessarily gloss over some bits and kind of romanticize and like skip over other parts and whatnot. It actually shows you the true depth and emotion behind everything, and it shows you the raw real bits. And all I'm gonna say is it was such a good read, because I feel like Shep in this, number one, I still think about him to this day and stuff he did and whatnot, and number two, Evie, I remember the girl's name, if I'm not wrong and whatnot, she was so strong as a character, the way she handled everything and the way everything came across. And all I'm gonna say is, if you want a good romance book that doesn't deal with stupid things these days, like the ones we get with like miscommunication and all these random third act conflicts thrown in there, read this, because the way this was handled was so good. I need more books like this if you've got recommendations. And yeah, this was like the best time ever. Genuinely wish I was joking, and I wish again there were more books like this to get back to, because this was so incredibly amazing, and I can't wait to read more of this author's backlist at this point, because I definitely have it on my TBR. Never lie. Okay, I won't lie when I say it, but I finished this in the span of an evening. I remember I started the audiobook of this as I was like crocheting the scarf for my mom at the beginning of the year, and I started it at about like, I'd say like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I'm not really sure, and then right before dinner I finished it. Now before you wonder how I finished an audiobook, a full length one, so fast, it's because I listened to my book sped up, and at that point in the year I think I was listening to this at 3.5x speed, which is crazy. I know it's not necessarily great, but then at this point, genuinely this book had me hooked. So in 2 sittings I managed to finish it in one evening, and all I'm gonna say is this is one book by Freida McFadden. I think this might be my favorite by her. That is so good. That kind of makes it worth reading all of her misses, because some of her books are hits, some of her books are misses. It's really just about the reading journey, getting there to the end goal and actually seeing if it was worth it towards the end. But at the same time, this one was so crazy because you won't guess in no word, I think, the final like ending plot twist and stuff. And when they start hitting, I genuinely wish I was joking. I wish I had like my camera tuned up and recording my face, because my jaw, I wish I was joking, like I said again, it was on the ground the entire time as I was kind of listening out of the last like maybe half hour or something of it. I wish I was joking again, because it was so crazy, it was so good, it was so wild and unexpected, because the way certain things tie up with like small Easter eggs that she dropped in earlier in like passing and stuff, and the way it kind of wraps up with a bow at the end. Oh my god, I wish I was joking. This book made me want to crash out because of how good it was, and because I did not see that ending and twist coming from like miles away, and I enjoyed this thoroughly. The Boyfriend by Freida McFadden. Now I did take a little bit of like a Freida break, and then a couple weeks later and I read this, and all I'm gonna say is I do believe I read this right after like Fourth Wing and stuff, and while this wasn't necessarily the best book ever because I kind of predicted the twist, all I'll say is, again, I read this in the span of one day. I remember I sat down earlier in the day, locked in with my Kindle, and then towards the night time, I was nearly done with it. The only reason I did not finish was because my eyes were drooping, and it was like, I'd say about 3 in the morning, and I was really exhausted, so I went to bed. But then the next morning, woke up and I finished it. And I remember, again, this one being so good. Not necessarily like Never Lie. This one was just good in the process of like how fast-paced it was, and how the twists at the beginning got me, because the ending I definitely called it and whatnot, but I will say that this is a good book, that it definitely helped me not get into a slump immediately after reading Fourth Wing, because that was on my 5 stars, my god tier books list of this year. And if I wouldn't have read this right after that, I definitely would have crashed out, because that was the only thought in my mind, that was the only thing I wanted to consider. And all I will say is, if I wouldn't have gotten to this at the point I did, genuinely I would probably not have read as many books that I did read this year at this point that I have, because this kind of saved my reading, considering that after having read this, I was on such like a reading kick to kind of read more fun books like this, kind of fast-paced, kind of get through with it and kind of see how it goes, and so it really saved me. The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros. Again, this was at the point wherein I had just finished Fourth Wing. I think this was like back-to-back with The Boyfriend, wherein I wanted to read more of her backlist, but I wanted to kind of save off on Iron Flame and like Onyx Storm and whatnot, so I was taking a break, and at that point I figured I'd pick this one up, just one of her backlist easy ones, kind of get through it, see how it goes. No, if you want a book that stabs you in your heart and then also stabs you in your back, you can consider this, because there's always this one thing that's established right from the very beginning of the book, and then at the very end, this is a romance book by the way, there's a plot twist thrown out of left field, and suddenly everything you knew from the beginning that you were made to believe is like flipped on over on its end, because something that you would absolutely not expect happens, and it's so tragic and sad, because it kind of shows you how life is like unpredictable and short. And the way it happens, all I'm gonna say is, this was such a beautiful book I read this year. I am considering like going back to reread it, but at the same time I'm not really sure if I can handle the emotion, because as I was reading this and I was scrolling on Goodreads reviews just to see if people felt the same way I was feeling about it, because I was having a good time. It has military background too, keep that in mind. People, they ended up really loving it on the reviews too, but someone actually spoiled it without putting a spoiler tag, and so even though I already knew what was coming at the end because of the spoiler, kind of, it still got me by shock. It was still a really good book. And all I'll say is, this has military romance background. It's got a single mom trying to look after her kids, and the guy, he's actually her dead brother from the military, his friend who's come in to now help them out with kind of like her parenting her children and whatnot, and then there's like a romance between the two of them. He's becoming more of a father than their real father to the kids, and it's just like a sweet book overall. But again, if you're reading it, be prepared to cry, especially at the very end, because sometimes when I think about that, I just feel so sad at the injustice of life, and then I remember that this is fiction. So moving on, How to Kill a Guy in 10 Ways. This is definitely fiction, and all I'm gonna say is, some of my favorite thriller books are the ones wherein you're in the perspective of like a serial killer, because whenever they speak, they're so unapologetic. It's sometimes like they're kind of out of touch with this world, and so it's always hilarious, it's always a good time. And I feel like always when I follow their, I guess, point of view, you kind of watch them do all of these things that are obviously not considered good in society, but because it's fiction, it's okay to read about, because they're all doing it with some sort of like greater purpose. And all I'm gonna say is, I support women's rights, but more importantly, I support women's wrongs, and this book was like a thorough justification of that, because I did not expect it to slap as hard as it did. It was not supposed to be this good, but it was. And again, the way this had me in a chokehold as I was reading it, because it was so good. It took me on such like a whirlwind ride of all these crazy batshit like wild things happening, and you would not expect it, but all you were doing from the very beginning was rooting for the girl and hoping she doesn't like get caught with all her like stuff that was going on. And it was so good. And so pick it up if you have to, pick it up if you want something fast, because this was such a good time overall. Now next up, I don't necessarily know what the series is called, but I actually paired these books together because it's a duology. We have Heartless Hunter and we've got Rebel Witch, and it's like a YA fantasy series. But all I'm gonna say is, if you want something that's good for like a beginner to get quickly into fantasy, if you want to try out the genre and see if it's for you, this is what you should start with. I wish this is what I started with, because I know I'd be on such a roll at this point. Even though I'm already starting to get into fantasy, it's just I'd be so much deeper in if I'd have read this first, because it's so good. It sets the bar for fantasy. There's like a great balance between romance, and it's slow burn dragged out, okay? And then there's the world and the fantasy stuff, and then there's like plot twists at the beginning of the book that you would not see coming. There's one at the middle of this book, the second one, that I definitely called, but the ones at this one did not see those. And then another thing is, you watch this book, you kind of see these two characters. It follows a witch and a witch hunter, by the way. They're starting to fall for each other, and then there's this like great betrayal that happens towards the end of this one, and suddenly they're enemies again in this one. So it's like enemies to lovers to again enemies, and then they start off again over here hating each other, but they actually have to pretend to be like fake married, so they kind of pass through the country and stuff and like not get detected because they are always high on like the government radar to be captured and like hunted and stuff. And so it's such a good series. I'm actually waiting for this one to be in stock in like paperback so I can like buy the series and like have physical copies on my shelf, because I know that this is something I'm 100% rereading in 2026, simply because nothing made me feel this way. No fantasy has ever been this fast for me apart from like Lightlark and stuff. And so these were so good. I had the best time reading, and please read them. Now again, these two books seemingly unrelated, but I put them on the same slide because the premise of them feel very similar. These entire books, they feel very similar to the other, and so we have Wait For It and we had Meet Me Halfway. Both of them follow like a single mom almost. She's like a single aunt, I guess you can call her, because her brother like passed away and his kids are now her responsibility, and this follows like a single mom, and it kind of just shows slice of life in their life as they're trying to navigate with like being a young woman but also looking after children and stuff. And so they're great books overall. They're definitely both slow burn, and they definitely both have similar like plot lines and stuff, and even certain events they are exactly the same in both books. So I'm not necessarily saying anything about the authors. I'm just saying that if you liked one book and you want to read the other, it's an option. If you like that and you want to read this because you want something similar, this is great. Because if you have one of these as like a 5-star on your list and you want more, specifically something related to that, then these are like 90% like copies of each other in my opinion, and they're both really good. So I had the best time. Again, I'm waiting to reread Wait For It in the new year, surprisingly, because I know I didn't necessarily like Mariana Zapata as an author the first time I read her, but now it's starting to grow on me. And this one specifically, there's certain scenes I think about on like a daily basis, especially one where Guy Dallas, he went back to his house to grab the PlayStation he's got to kind of play with one of her kids or one of her brother's kids, Louis, because the older brother was not like letting Louis come in and play with his gang and whatnot. So that Louis would not feel like lonely and stuff, this guy got his own PlayStation and they were like hanging together. Again, such sweet scenes overall, and so I want to reread, and I definitely will in the new year. But these are also great books and they're slow burn, so they give you all the vibes and they make you wait for it, literally, and it takes such a long time, but it's so worth it. Now here I have the entire Chestnut Springs series. Do keep in mind I gave 2 of these books, Heartless and Reckless, the second and the fourth ones, 5 stars already, but I still wanted to shout it out because again, these are my favorite books, because the other ones that did not make the cut for 5 stars, they're still some cozy, comforting romances. They're country, small town ones that I keep thinking about. I can't wait to revisit in the new year, reread them because they're so good. And there's always something about them that always like calls back to me, certain scenes, some certain stuff that's happened and whatnot. And so they're hilarious. They're great in terms of like found family. They're great in terms of like romance and swoon and like enough emotional depth. And I feel like the balance between everything is so good, and you would not expect these to be so good, but they are. And so definitely pick these up if you haven't already. Buy into the internet and what they say about it, because this is like the best series for me to come out of 2025, and I'm so happy I got to them this year finally. This year I also ended up getting, I think, deeper into webtoon, because I only read like a couple last year because of my friend kind of recommending them, but this year truly I deep dove into it towards the beginning of the year. And all I'm gonna say is I read this one series called Marry My Husband at the same time as I was reading like Chestnut Springs, but I was reading this on my phone, and this was like the best time ever. I remember like there were like 7 odd books or something in it, and I started it and instantly told my sister at the beginning of like the first one that she needs to read it too. So then we both were buddy reading. We read the entire series in like less than a week, and that's crazy because I'm not necessarily a fast webtoon reader, and so the fact that I actually binged these and they were so good, because she actually comes back from the afterlife and she's like reborn again to kind of now get her husband from the previous life, her current boyfriend, and her best friend together, because in the last life they were like cheating on her as she was dying, and you know her boss is her new love interest over here. And the way it was done is so good. Those books were so fast paced. Again, they've got everything, and the graphics in them, like the animation style and whatnot, is so pretty in my opinion, because some of the photos that the artist drew, like genuinely you're gonna start to wonder how a human made them. And it was such a good time. And there's like a show to watch too. My sister's watched it, I haven't, but I can't wait to get to it because she's only spoken good things about them. It kind of resembles the art style too, and that's all I want. Basically, in this modern age and world of AI, if you want something that feels incredibly human and amazing and just something AI can never replicate, this is it. The X by Freida McFadden. Again, similar reasons to the other books I've read by hers. This was really fast paced. I was reading like during exam seasons and stuff, but I still managed to finish in like no time whatsoever. And I remember specific memories of me picking up my Kindle, reading one chapter, then going back and reading one chapter of my school syllabus for the exam. And as soon as I'd be done done with like one chapter and whatnot of the school syllabus. I'd give this to myself kind of as like a reward and treat for finishing that, and that's the way I got my syllabus done, because this was so good, had me on the edge of my seat. I would not have guessed it in a million years. And this again was one of the best Freida books I read, because it was so crazy towards the end, and the whole build up and everything coming for it and whatnot, I really loved it. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Originally I gave this 5 stars. I reread it later in the year and then I made it 4.5. So while it does fall in both of those videos, I just wanted it as a special mentions, because regardless of the fact that I dropped the star rating on this was still such a good book, and I'm definitely rereading in the new year because I have my copy. I have no reason not to, and I had the best time when I was reading this for the first time, because I love the characters, I love the romance, the story. It's Emily Henry. I loved everything about it basically, and yeah, this was such a good time that it's definitely one of my favorites, and it's something I think about on a regular basis, especially like certain jokes that are specific to this one, namely her being a city girl and the guy, she hates him kind of, but they're like rivals, and he's telling her not to like get the hopes up of like a pig farmer in the country and whatnot, because he likes her and he just doesn't want to show it. And again, other specific things, please keep reading if you haven't already, and it's a great one. Dr. Cadia. I believe this was the first book I was reading for my reading 50 books in 50 days challenge, and this was such a worthy one. I will say the romance for me was kind of like a flop show, because it's very much like insta-lovey, very physical, but the actual storyline in this with the fantasy and like all the other elements and the dark gothic vibes, I genuinely wish I hadn't read this over the summer and that I saved it for like fall, because it would be perfect. But even though I didn't, I had such a good time regardless with the mystery and the way that things were solved at the end. And again, I wasn't a huge fan of the romance, but it had a good balance, and all I'll say is it definitely had a couple of great scenes that sometimes I do think about. And there was a little bit of French that was spoken in this book that I was able to translate and understand, because I do definitely understand French, and so it definitely felt like a good use of my time on Duolingo and stuff finally coming to fruition when I was actually reading this, and I was like, wait, I understand what they're talking about in French. So here we are. First time caller. I think this was like again in my 50 books in 50 days challenge, and all I'll say is the romance, it felt like a little bit of like a disappointment slightly, because the people, they weren't necessarily brave enough at the beginning to be with each other, and sometimes I felt like the guy, he did not deserve the girl in some bits only because he just wasn't able to stand up for her, but then other bits are so sweet, so swoony, that looking back I still had a great time overall, and I can't wait to read the next one in the series when it comes out, because I do remember really loving the side characters that it's about. And this one specifically, again, great scenes overall. It's a great read for like February Valentine's time, because of the scenes, because of how swoony it is, the banter, and you would not expect it, but this again hits so hard and it went so good in specific bits that I'm actually kind of craving a reread at this point, because I enjoyed the audiobook too of this, and there were like certain sound effects because they like run like a radio kind of show, and then it comes with its own gripes and stuff, and then there's a lot that goes on in this book that's really great. But I remember this one specific scene where it's a radio show and they're kind of trying to set her up with like a romantic interest, because the entire city kind of wants her to kind of find love, and so she's kind of set up with this one date who stands her up, and she's just waiting there, and she lets the guy Aiden know that she's just like been stood up, so she's gonna leave in a bit, and he's just like wait there, and he shows up for the date so her night does not get wasted, and they like go bowling and stuff and have the best time ever. And again, it's so swoony and sweet, so it was a good one. Shall Mourn. This is the last one in None Shall Sleep, Some Shall Break, that trilogy. Again, it's like a YA trilogy, but tell me why YA books have been hitting so hard, because this was so good. The first two in the series, I won't even lie, they were like 3.5 stars max for me. I didn't have the best time. They were mid books, but this one specifically, it follows like one serial killer that you've been kind of seeing since book 1 and whatnot, and now you get to go into his mind as he's on the run, kind of figure out that situation. And all I'm gonna say is, if you want something that I do believe reminds people of Criminal Minds, but like for kids, this is the one. I haven't necessarily watched Criminal Minds, so don't come after me because I'm not necessarily sure, but that's what I've seen online, and I definitely agree with like the stuff I've seen, like trailers and like movie clips of that for it, because this is so good. It follows like the FBI kind of tracking down cold-blooded serial killers, and then the way this goes, absolutely crazy. This was 4.5 stars, and I had the best time ever. And the author's actually coming out with like a companion book or something like that in this world next year, so I can't wait to get to that. I don't think I said it in my 2026 releases because I forgot, but that's definitely on my TBR, and I cannot wait. I wish I was joking. I'm counting down days because this was so good. It goes so wild and so crazy, and that's shit that you would not expect, and the turns it takes. All I'm gonna say is, if you want a book that'll make you crash out after you're done reading it, this one, because I was like shocked for the rest of the day after I finished. So again, a great one overall. And I feel like the first couple definitely bring down the series because they weren't my kind of books in the beginning, but then this one makes up for it because it was so good, and the entire series is worth reading just so you can get to this one. Deep Cuts. Now this one kind of dissects songs, but then you're also watching these two characters who they aren't necessarily like right for each other. It's almost toxic, but then they keep going back to each other in this way that they aren't necessarily like proclaiming love, but they're always there. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like a canon event that you need to be there for me to kind of explain it to you in my version of events and you still understand what I'm talking about. But this one was great because it wasn't like any other book I've ever read, but it still somehow did the job good, and it did it so great that I had a good time overall. And I do believe it's being made like a movie or like a show or something, and I can't wait to watch it because I want this stuff to come back to my screen to haunt me, because I remember this being so good and I had some of the best times ever as I was reading this, which is why a great book. Story of my life. This is a slow burn where they're like pretending to date, so she gets like inspiration because she's like a romance writer and she's kind of like in almost like writer's block, and he is kind of like the fixer-upper guy who's fixing up the small town like house. It's almost like a bungalow she's bought for herself. And all I'm gonna say is, again, the scenes in this are so good. The specific scenes I keep going back to, and I can't wait for the second book in the series because we get more of the other side characters and stuff. And while they aren't necessarily my favorites, I'm still waiting because the book after that will be one of my favorites. And all I'm gonna say is, Lucy Score, this was my first book by her and it won't be my last because her slow burn is done so well, and I still think about the guy sometimes. So this was a great book too overall. The Perfect Divorce. I was only reading this because I wanted closure on the first book, which is called The Perfect Marriage. You've probably heard of it. It's been making its rounds all throughout the years on Book Talk. And the thing is, I did not enjoy that one because I felt like it was kind of predictable and then whatnot. But then this one, all I'm gonna say is, it's crazy how an author can do a complete 360 on like a book that you did not enjoy, and suddenly this is like one of the best thrillers I've read this year, because 4.5 stars easy. The way it ends off and the kind of turns this one takes. All I'm gonna say is the main girl in this, Sarah, she's kind of wild and insane and she should probably be locked up, but at the same time, I kind of love reading about her crazy antics and how wild it gets and whatnot. So please pick it up if you haven't already. It's so good. There's stuff you would not expect, and there's stuff that kind of references the first book and kind of ties everything together. So if you feel like the first one had loopholes and like missing gaps in plot, this goes back to patch all of that and then still tie this own story with like a big bow on top. And all I'm gonna say is, it was wild, and if I could get more of these kind of books, I would definitely read them because it was so good. 0 stars, do not recommend. I'll be so for real, I only picked this up because of the title, but again, it's such a good book, and this is definitely not 0 stars. I would recommend it because this kind of follows this like vacation gone wrong wherein the sun literally goes like missing and stuff. It's gone from the sky, and so the world's coming to an end. They're trying to figure out what to do without the sun, and you know, they do not recommend that vacation. It's about the vacation, not the book, but still they're kind of going along with it, surviving this like almost apocalyptic world, because now people are coming in charge, trying to form like some sort of like government to kind of get the others under control. And then this guy is like almost like the leader of the people that's been chosen as part of the revolt, and there's like all these crazy things happening. It's so outrageous, but it's so good, and I think I might reread this next year again before I head out for like vacation, because it's the perfect book to get you in the vibes, and it's so funny unexpectedly that I had such a good time. All I'm gonna say is, he was drinking so much in this book that I was actually scared that he'd die of alcohol poisoning or his liver would get completely damaged. So that's one thing I definitely do remember, but this one again was really good regardless, and you have to pick it up if you haven't already because it's so unexpected, but it's so good, and I love when books do that. Silver Elite. Now, when I was reading this, because again, this was one of the first fantasy books I've ever read, I gave it 5 stars, but looking back, it was like maybe 3.5, 4 at best. And so it definitely wasn't part of that video as my final wrap up of the year, but it was still a great book overall, and I definitely do enjoy like reading it and whatnot, and I'm going to continue the series to see where it goes, because the last page plot twist goes crazy, stuff in the middle goes crazy, their romance is like, it's not necessarily like swoony and stuff, but the banter is really good, and the stuff the guy does, it's a little toxic, but it's still great regardless, and I had a good time overall. What can I say? So this was a good one, and I had fun, not necessarily like 5-star fun, but it was like enough to be in this list fun, which is why here we are. This summer will be different. Do keep in mind, I'm only speaking about the first half of the book because the second half definitely fell off for me, but the first half had like yearning and stuff, and they were kind of like one night stands but then now they have to hang out and stuff because she did not realize that he is the brother of her best friend that they're going to be spending their vacation with, and so it's kind of awkward all around, and they still want to be together, but they don't want to break the best friend's heart and like kind of ruin things between the best friend and the main girl, so they don't do it, but then they're still like hanging around each other, and like there's all this tension, and it's really good overall, all I'm going to say. But the second half again wasn't so great, and the beginning too, it was kind of like a physical connection to start off with, which is why again it's definitely, it's supposed to be only a few people's cup of tea. It wasn't mine, but it was good overall, especially the yearning bits, because those were great, and the summer vibes too. Yours truly, this was just shy of 5 stars for me, and this was such a good one. I feel like Abby Jimenez is such a good author to come out of 2025 for me, because this one specifically, again, great balance between heavy emotions, but then there's like enough romance and swoony happy bits that you feel lighthearted enough and you definitely take it for the rom-com it is, but then there's still like these heavier bits that kind of give it depth, and it feels very like adult and like, I guess, mature in a way that all these other books with like third act conflicts can't do, because this, right from the very beginning, you can see these two people's connection established and you're like rooting for them, but then also it kind of depends all along whether they can actually make it work and stuff, and so it's all because of like external consequences, and they're kind of perfect for each other, soulmates made in heaven, but it really depends. And the whole story overall and the anxiety rep in this was so good. I had such a good time, and I'm so obsessed with Abby's books overall. The answer is no. I read this while I was sick, and it was maybe like about 100 pages, give or take, maybe under, maybe a little over, but it was so good that, you know, I was like giggling, I was trying not to sob. It made me feel every single emotion, and it's so crazy because the writing style of this man, I think I highlighted like about 40 things or so, and this was like a 100-page book, so every other page I was highlighting something. And all I'm gonna say is I've never read anything like it. I don't think I'll ever read a short story as good, and so this was a great one overall. I had such a good time reading, and in the new year I'm definitely gonna be picking up Frederick Bachman's books to kind of see what the hype is about and get like a full-length experience of this, because his writing is beautiful. I just need more of it in my life, and here we are. I found you. All I'm gonna say is I was on the verge of like a panic attack, like an anxiety attack after I was done with this, because this is crazy but in the disgusting sort of way, wherein the kind of shit that happens in this book kind of makes you aware about stuff that's happening outside, because it's very realistic, it's very gross. Unfortunately, this happens to real humans out there, and so it kind of makes you aware of the world situation and how, unfortunately, on like an everyday basis, there's people who kind of go through what happened in this. And so please check triggers if you go into this. It's definitely very important for your mental health, but this is on my favorites because, again, this is the only thriller that's ever come close to making me feel the way I felt after reading Pretty Girls. That is in a whole league of its own. This doesn't come close to that one, but it's still wired in a way that I would not recommend it to anyone if you're scared about your mental health going into it, because again, it goes deep, it goes dark, there's some bits that are absolutely gruesome, and again, the way it ends off, it's sad, and I was like trying not to cry, and like, if you want something that's going to make you crash out in the worst way possible, this is the one. The husbands, every time her husband goes to the attic to change the light bulb or like do anything and whatnot, a different man walks out, and all along she's never been married, so it's like this attic producing this like bunch of husbands for this girl. And so it's a very interesting concept overall. It's really funny and crazy, and you're trying to see where it goes. And the ending, while I will say it wasn't my favorite, the whole lead up to it and the whole like concept is like outrageous enough that it needed a spot on this list, because it was a fun book overall. Don't Let Her Stay, again, the ending wasn't so great in my opinion. It definitely was like almost predictable, but at the same time it was kind of like a basic twist wherein this sort of ending happens in almost every other thriller book, so it's not like a great surprise. But looking back, it was still like a really fast-paced one, and I enjoyed like the build-up and stuff, because there's a lot of gaslighting that happens in this, so if you don't want to read like a frustrating book, do not pick this up. But then the way it happens and makes you question everything, whether the narrator is like unreliable and stuff, that was really fun overall, and I had a good time, so this is here. The Summer Do Us Part, this was such a perfect summer rom-com in my opinion. This is the funniest book maybe I've read the entire year, apart from like Heartless by Elsie Silver, because the way this goes so crazy. It's these two strangers pretending to be like fake married and stuff so she can keep her job, except they're falling for each other, and in the midst of everything there's all these like jokes, and the way this made me laugh on the edge of my seat, just like laughing my ass off the entire time. This was so good. Please pick it up if you haven't already. Again, it's swoony and it's great. The romance, it's definitely more like a golden retriever sort of romance, so it's more up my alley in that sense, because those I really end up enjoying more. But then again, the humor sort of adds to it, and it's a good book overall. Would definitely recommend for the summertime, and I had the best time ever. That's all I'm gonna say. This is again an obvious one, The Summer I Turned Pretty. Not just the first one, but the entire series. I read them in anticipation of watching the show. I never got around to it, and I will in the new year. I'm kind of saving it for summertime now, but again, the way this made me feel, and the way it kind of made me feel like I was part of this like sort of book club, because I knew what was going to happen in the show along with the rest of the world, as everyone was like actually waiting on episodes because they were watching, I wasn't. This was a great series overall. I feel like it's just like a canon experience you need to experience once in your life, and maybe it'll frustrate you, but this gave me like 2000s like rom-com vibes. It gave me like nostalgic summer vibes from like back when I was a kid, and so all I'm gonna say is maybe one day down the line, I'd like my children to be going to a beach house and kind of experiencing these vibes together. Not necessarily the love triangle, but just the vibes, because this is what you need to grow up to. This is like such a good book overall, and yeah, they don't do YA like this anymore because it was so good. And the way it made me feel, the second book especially, I was trying not to sob because I finished it while I was on public transportation and there were people around me, so like I didn't want people to see me crying. But yeah, I was commuting back home from college, and all I wanted to do was come back home and crash out and get to the third book because I didn't have my physical copy on hand to see where the story would go, because this was like so good and I did not expect to connect as hard as I did. So you'll remember me, looking back, this is definitely a 5-star book, but I put it in my favorites because I did not originally give it 5 stars. It was like a 4.5, and I will reread in the new year and then for sure ascertain if it was like 5 stars all along. But this is so unexpected because the couple in this had this like almost like a long distance sort of relationship that you're not expecting to work, but then again, it's Abby Jimenez. You're already falling for them and the idea of them as a couple, but then the romance is so great, and again, the deeper stuff that happens in it is so good, and the whole balance between the lighthearted and the heavy bits, and then everything else that comes with it, and the gripes, and the fact that the internet does not like this book, but then I loved it, so I went in with like really poor expectations, but then coming out of it, this was like one of the best ones ever because it was so good. So did we all just read like the wrong book and whatnot and not the same one as me? Because this is such a good one overall. I had the best time ever. I was like giggling and like trying not to cry, and like that was back to back with the biggest like crash out and almost like a conflicting range of emotions as I was reading it, but it was so good overall and I had the best time ever. And the guys, like, compared to Rhysand, who I love obviously, so like I had the best time as we should have expected, which is why here we are. Can't wait to read it and give this a 5-star it deserves. Love haters, if you want a book that gives you 2000s rom-com vibes, but at the same time the very last scene, if you want it to be also something you'd kind of expect watching on your TV, this is basically perfect. There's bits at the beginning, don't get me wrong, that definitely frustrated me and made me wonder if I was enjoying the book in the first place, but the ending definitely made up for it. It's kind of like out of left field, it's kind of out of pocket, and most people don't like it online, but it worked for me. And the ending, last like scene where she's hanging off a helicopter, I won't give you premise on it. All I'm gonna say is I want that on my screen so bad to actually watch it as a movie, because now, yeah, I had the best time ever, and I can't wait to read more of Catherine Center's books, because like this was actually surprisingly really good. And I don't know why I said surprisingly, because I know I love The Bodyguard by this author. It's just that going into this, I did not expect a lot, and this definitely made me walk out with so much more, and I had the best time ever. So if you want a book that gives you romance and love and swoon, but then also kind of like little simple joys of life, just like The Bodyguard, this isn't necessarily like it, but you can kind of see why the writing style is similar, and so this was great too, and I had the best time. Not even gonna try to pronounce this one, but R.F. Kuang's new book from this year, all I'm gonna say is this was so good. They go to hell to kind of bring their professor back who's dead so he can like finish grading their stuff, because they're like Harvard students, except now they have to find him in the circles of hell. And this is so unexpectedly good, because I expected to genuinely hate it going into it, because the premise, the concept of like the fantasy, it felt like intimidating and scary to me and maybe not my cup of tea. But tell me why I was addicted to this. I couldn't wait to see where it would go, and I had the best time ever. So again, such a good book of this year, and now I have to read like Babel by her next year anyhow, because if this wasn't as scary as I thought it would be, then maybe I've been a little too scared, more scared than I should be of that one. And maybe that could be my new favorite book too, because this one, tell me why I was thinking about it for the next 1 month after having finished it, like on a non-stop basis, and this was great too overall. Call me anytime. Now the thing is, again, I was sent like an arc of this, so I was kind of like iffy going into it, because like the concept is very interesting, but all I'll say is, actually having read this book, it's funny and it's crazy and it takes turns you would not expect. But the most important part is, while I didn't necessarily like the second half of the romance, the first was really good. And the funniness, the humor of it, funniness is not a word, but the humor, the, I guess, hilarity of the situation, all I'm gonna say is that really got me, because every other page I was giggling at how honestly ridiculous it was, and it was a good book in that sense. I remember definitely laughing really hard at it, so sometimes all you need is a good laugh, and this book definitely gave me that. And while the romance wasn't my favorite in the second half, it's still worth going back to and kind of giggling over. And so this was a good book too. The Tenant, just like any other Freida book, this again goes really crazy at the end. I would not have seen that ending coming, and it still had me on the tips of my toes because I was like trying to like guess shit. But the way these like small clues add up to something so much bigger that I would have never called in a million years towards the end. Again, one of my favorites I've read by her, and I'm so happy I got to this despite the like almost negative reviews I've been seeing online, because why do people hate on this? Because it was actually surprisingly good in my opinion, and I went in with poor expectations, but I had the best time ever. So this was a really good one too. How bad can things get? All I'm gonna say is this was my introduction to almost like a graphic sort of horror genre, and all I'll say is I have to go back and read more of this author's work. Actually considering it now going into the new year, because I actually have like a couple of their backers downloaded to my Kindle, because this one again was sent as an ARC to me, and I don't even know what I did to deserve it. But all I'm gonna say is this is so wild, it's so crazy. If you want a book that's gonna make you throw up, but then at the same time you still cannot wait to see what happens next, almost like a train fire wherein you know you should look away, but you're still entranced in this like almost like a gruesome sense. You shouldn't be, but you can't like peel your eyes away. And this isn't a train wreck of a book, it's done so well, you would not see shit coming in this. But yeah, if you want like a book like that, this is definitely it. And this was like 4.5 stars, 4.75 easy. And now I can't wait to read more by this author, because like if this is what the horror genre has been all along, I've been missing out, because this was so good. And I still think about it sometimes, considering the fact that it's horror, but it stuck with me, and it genuinely had me like creeped out on the edge of my seat at some bits. And so this was great overall. And every morning the way home gets longer and longer. This one, if you feel like you love someone but you're losing them at the same time, and it's sort of like the grief of kind of going along with it, or if you've already lost a loved one, you should definitely consider it and go making sure you know what this book is about before going into it, because your mental health comes first. But if you want to deal with those set of emotions, this kind of grapples with that really well. And it's a novella, and considering all of that, it still felt like a 5-star book. It was a great book, that's all I'm going to say, and tears were definitely shed, so would highly recommend. And again, I can't wait to read more of Frederick Bachman's work. Children of Fallen Gods, this is the second book in the Daughter of No World series. I think it's called War of Lost Hearts or something like that trilogy, and I didn't necessarily like love the first book. I felt like it was like an okay read, but this one, the internet doesn't like it, but I loved it so much. It goes so crazy, it goes so wild. There's like a new perspective introduced that you would not kind of expect how it ties into the story, but it does, and the way that goes absolutely crazy is so good. And I can't wait to finish like the third book in the series to kind of finish my trilogy and see now where we kind of go off from where we were left off in this book with the cliffhangers, because this was so good. That's all I'm gonna say. It was so good, and it kind of redeems the entire series for me, because like there's shit that I would not have ever expected that happens in this book, and suddenly now I can't wait to see what happens next in this world, because it was so good. That's all. It was so good. Behind the Net, ignore the cover. I'm so sorry about that. But overall, this was such a good book, because again, it made me giggle like no other rom-com has. At that point, I wasn't really enjoying a lot of the romance I was reading, so I was like switching genres up. But this kind of brought my faith back in romance again, because this had all these like quintessential romance scenes, but done in such like a good execution that I actually enjoyed my time. And it's like a typical rom-com, but it's done so well in this like weirdly, almost like a great swoony way that you would not expect, but it was so good overall that now I can't wait to read the next ones. And I'm definitely continuing the series in the new year as palette cleansers and stuff, because they're great books overall. And if this first one made me feel this way, the next ones are just going to keep getting better, because I can't wait for those characters' books, especially Rory Miller. And so we'll just have to see, but this was great. Normal People, this again is like a very canon event sort of book. It's only for the people who, if you've ever experienced some sort of like miscommunication to the highest degree, and just the way it keeps happening with this one specific toxic person, but you still keep going back to them. It's just something that if you relate to this book, I feel sorry for you, but also you are able to relate to it, so you're able to relate to one of the best literature pieces ever, and so it's the best time ever. And if you can't relate to this book, and so you did not end up liking it, all I'm gonna say is you should be thankful you don't like this book, because the ones who relate to it, they kind of get it. Because again, the way it made me feel, such a conflicting range of emotions, it was such a good book overall. I don't know why it took so time to read this, but now that I have read it, I'm so happy that I did, because the way it made me feel, genuinely, I'm making playlists. I'm kind of making this whole like Pinterest board and like that's crazy. And so it was a good book overall. Tell me 3 things if you've ever again suffered with like the loss of a loved one and kind of processing that grief. This is a great book to kind of go through with that, but also kind of give you almost like these glimmers of happiness in the middle, kind of rounding it out and showing you that life isn't supposed to be only grief. There's also like great moments that come in the middle and kind of show you hope through that grief. And it was a great book overall. I had such a good time, and this is YA. So maybe YA is the one that's truly like the banger genre that's coming out of this year for me, because this was so good. Tell me why I didn't get to it sooner. And yeah, I'm really happy with this one overall. Co-worker, just like other Freida books, I had such a good time with this one. This might be again one of my favorites by her, because the whole getting to the end situation and the whole like journey was so good. But then also, despite the fact that I was like hooked and I can't wait to see where it would go, it was so fast paced enough that I finished it in like, again, one day, a couple sittings. I finished it. I stayed up the night to finish it off, and so all I'm gonna say is this was great. The ending was crazy. The plot twists, again, they linked to like specific clues in this book, and when it ties them together, so good. And I'm so happy I read it. So such a great book overall too. Haunted Ever After, I remember specifically that I sat down and read this on Halloween day, and if that wouldn't have been the case, this wouldn't have been in the vlog. But because the vibes definitely hit me with what was going on outside and what was going on inside with the book and stuff, all I'm gonna say is I had the best time ever, because this is definitely one of those like predictable, almost like a boring palate cleanser, but you're just reading it because you want the seasonal vibes. But the way it made me feel, because of the fact that I read it at the right time, it was a favorite, surprisingly, and I can't wait to see where the series goes. So next year, maybe on Halloween day, I'll continue it and kind of see that, but this was great too. In my dreams, I hold a knife. Now this one I'm conflicted about, because I do remember enjoying like the first half, but the second half, it definitely fell off. And there's no knife, by the way, it's actually a scissor that's the murder weapon in this, so it's kind of like clickbait, but at the same time, it was a good book overall too. I had a good time reading the first half, and the dark academia vibes are really great as well. And the ending, while I definitely did not enjoy that, it's still worth reading, so it was a good book. Ash Falls, I cannot wait to get to the second one, that's all I'm gonna say, because this was sent as an arc to me, so I finished it before it was like officially published. And then now I have to suffer because it was just recently published, and I have to wait until the new year to kind of get to the next one in it and kind of see where the story goes, because again, it's so wild, the turns it takes. It's almost like, you know, when there's certain authors wherein they write these characters that they almost do not care about in the best way possible. Like, they're not trying to have all these happy things happen to the character, they're having plot happen to the character to the point where it's actually enjoyable, because all these unexpected things are happening, and in your head you're like, this is the main character, he cannot die, so all the bad things cannot happen to him, but they still end up happening anyway. It's so crazy, it's so wild in the best way possible, and I had the best time with this. I was on the edge of my seat. There were certain scenes I was just like, no way that just happened, and like plot twists and like crazy cliffhangers, and now can't wait to read the second one because I'm on the edge of my seat waiting so desperately because this was so good. Shatter Me series, again, I gave a couple books in this 5 stars, which is why we won't ruminate on it, but this definitely, the first half wasn't my favorite of the series and whatnot, but going into it, kind of continuing it, it definitely became my favorite. And now I do think about Erin on like an almost daily basis, so I'm happy I read the series overall, had the best time ever, and it had to be here as a special mention shout out. Ghosted. If you want, you know the sad songs off of Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift, if you want those in a book, so specifically like Peter, How Did It End, The Black Dog, LOML, those songs basically, if they came to have like a kid, it would be this book, because like, again, it's so tragically sad, it's a second chance, but then in the best way possible, because the way they find their love back to each other. And I wish it was a little more dramatic for it to be a 5-star in my opinion, but it was handled in this like adult way, kind of in a sense that also has to incorporate for the child they kind of share together. So for her sake, again, it was done really well. I had a good time overall, and I'm happy I read this year. Picking Daisies on Sundays, all I'm gonna say is this is one of the best rom-coms I ever read, especially after the previous book, so I didn't like crash out with like honestly the most heartbroken vibes ever. This kind of gave me everything you would ever want from like a 2000s rom-com. I was picturing it so well in my head and had the best time reading. So overall, a great book too. I had so much fun with this. Such swoony great bits, and this man writes poetry for her in French. What more would you expect? And he wears glasses sometimes, so that's all you'd ever want. So good again, and you have to read this if you haven't already. Leather and Lark, this is the second one in the Butcher and Blackbird series, and this is probably my only like favorite coming out of the series, because like the other two were okay, but this one was so good. It's Marriage of Convenience. The internet hates it, but for some reason I loved it so much, it worked for me. And the way they're doing all these like acts of service things for each other, and then there's like other things going on in the plotline where there's like people after them trying to kill them, but at the same time it's so good. It's like a serial killer rom-com to the best extent, and I had the best time with it. So if you want something that's ridiculous but at the same time it balances like dark humor and comedy with like enough spoony romance, this is it. Rose and Chains, now going into it, I did not know that this is supposed to be like a Harry Potter fanfic published, but then at this point, now that I do know, it still does not change my opinion on things, because I had such a good time reading this. The fantasy was great, the romance was so slow burn, and it was so good. It was dragged out until like the very end, like the second last chapter, and like it goes so crazy to the point where I was actually addicted to see where it would go next. And this was definitely one of like the faster paced fantasy books I've read, despite the fact that this was longer. But yeah, I had the best time ever. Please again pick it up if you haven't already, because this was so good and I'm so happy I got to this. Quicksilver, again a fantasy book. This is definitely slower in the middle, but the beginning and the ending especially make up for it, because wish I was joking, but the ending again, I would like sacrifice like a kidney for it just so I could experience it again, because it goes so wild and so crazy. You would never expect it in like this life and the next, and now I can't wait to see where the series goes, because the second book is out, so I can't wait to get to that and kind of see where the cliffhanger takes off of after that, because like the entire dynamic has been flipped on over after that ending, and so I know it's gonna be wild and so worth it. And so here we are with this one. Romance Book Club, essentially it's like a book club of all these guys reading romance books to kind of perfect their relationships with women. And all I'm gonna say is, can we make that book club real in like real life, because we need more guys like that, and this is like the standard in men. So all I'm gonna say is, such a good book overall. Can't wait to continue the series. I'm so excited for the others books and stuff. And yeah, this was so good, because it was so unexpected, but it was so fun that you have to read it if you haven't already. Light Lark, this one, I do believe this is gonna be the last one on the slideshow, but yeah, this one again was such like a fast-paced fantasy. I finished it in like no time. I was so addicted to like the actual story and seeing where the shit would go and whatnot, and the way you would not expect certain like turn of events and stuff, especially towards the end, and like the way it goes so wild and crazy. If you haven't already read it, please read it. I know the internet is like very again polarizing on its views about it, but again I enjoyed it so much that I can't wait to see now where the second book goes off. And it does have love triangle, and she does end up choosing the person I was not rooting for. I'm Team Grimm through and through, so hopefully in the next book we get more of that. But all I'm gonna say is, regardless of if we do or if we don't, this was so good overall. One of the best fantasy books I've ever read. And if you want like a strong first book in a series that's fast-paced enough that you're addicted from like the very first page, this is it, because it's so good. A great starting point for like a beginner fantasy reader, and overall I had the best time ever. Yeah, as predicted, now we've reached the end of the slideshow. Basically, these were all of my favorite books of 2025. I've been yapping for longer than I thought I would, but regardless, it's all worth it, because these books are so good in the sense that it made worth reading all of the other books that I did not enjoy this year, simply because I got to get to these amazing bangers of gems. If you haven't gotten to any, hopefully you take away like a rec or two from this video, because these were again, in my opinion, worth reading out of the 250 that I've read, which is why here we are. They definitely weren't enough to fall on my 5-star list, but that's also because I'm picky and I nitpick at every single thing in books. That's like a really miserable way to read, but I do it anyway, which is why here we are. But I definitely will be rereading some of these in the new year, so you can kind of expect vlogs on that. But regardless, yeah, now we've reached the end of this vlog, because these were all of my favorite books. I think they were about 50, but then again, the way I made it on the slideshow and stuff, some were extra, some were not, which is why, give or take, 50 favorite books of the year. And so if you haven't already, please get to them. But yeah, now we've reached the end of this vlog, because now I'm done yapping about these books. I need to get a drink of water because I'm tired of talking, which is why here we are. Hope you guys had a fun time coming along with me in today's sit down presentation video, and like, comment, share, subscribe if you did. YouTube things, you know how to do them. And now I'll see you tomorrow for our daily routine for the month of December for Bookmas, which is why take care, stay safe, stay tuned, and that's literally it. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you did have a good time overall, regardless of me not giving premise in this video. And hopefully now you get to also reading some of my favorite books, so we can kind of start like an online book club where we discuss it, because that's all I literally need. These are such good books that they're so worth anyone's time in my opinion, which is why here we are. Hopefully you end up enjoying them too. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow, not directly, and until then, bye.